So here are we trying to understand about in VMs what does virtual network and public IP, NIC, security groups do. We'll get into each of the slabs and how we can create a virtual network, how we can create a NIC, how can we create a security group, and what does a play the importance the role importance plays with. But before that, we'll understand what is a virtual network, what is a public IP, NIC, and a security group. I'll go here and I would like to make you understand where does this services like virtual network, subnet, NIC, and security group comes in. When we are talking about Azure network, see, these machines which we are trying to create, virtual machines, are in the hardware. It's running in a hardware, and this entire machines, the hardwares are connected using Azure network. And this is internet. We are connected to internet. Everyone are connected to internet and everything. And we are trying now. If you are accessing the YouTube or a Google and everything, it's end of the day. Those are these are given access to the public network from a specific endpoint. Now, similarly, Azure network is an internal network in Azure, but all the machines are connected. When we say not virtual machines, their hardwares are all connected in that. And when we are trying to create from going to Azure portal, creating a machine and all that, along with it, Azure is giving us an option. It's a mandatory choice to actually given to be taken when you are trying to create a virtual machine in your subscription. Azure is saying that this machine, virtual machine, will be placed along with a virtual network. So I'll give you a logical network. It's not an Azure network. It's a logical network inside the Azure network. How that can be created is a huge concept behind which we will not get into it right now. What you have to understand is your virtual machine will be placed in a virtual network which you will be creating, which is having the again a CIDR range. You can prefer a CIDR range. So CIDR is careless interdomain routing. So you will have, when we say, you can actually create your machines with a specific IP address space and everything. So you can choose what type of how many CIDR as an example point of view. Like you can choose 10.0.0.0/8 as your network IP address space, and you can place all your virtual machines in that basis. And if you are seeing here, we are also seeing subnets. So we'll segregate our virtual any network. When we are segregating into parts, right, we call it as subnet. So let's assume, if you're not understanding this, what someone are trying to say, that we are going to build a community, a huge community. So let's assume the huge community is Azure, and they're going to give you access this entire in that one. They're going to, whenever you are trying to purchase a house, you will be given a specific area. So along with it, you this network, with this virtual network, whatever you are trying to, just not your house, whatever you're trying to set up in this area will be having an access to this virtual network. So you are given an access. So where does the virtual network will be useful? If you remember in network basic concepts when I spoke, network is something is used to communicate between two machines. So it's just not virtual machine is a service in Azure, right? When we go into Azure, we have lot many other services. So if I go here, when we are talking about other services, we can connect we can place these different services like virtual machine scale sets, container instances, Kubernetes services, um, the other application gateways. All these solutions which you are seeing in different categories of the services can be linked to uh, a virtual network within a same virtual network where a machine is residing. And with this, your virtual machine can interact with a database, with your virtual machine can interact with other services which you are creating in your Azure. And that's why you are given an opportunity for your machine to be connected with the rest of the services or with other machines. You are having your own internal network, and that is called virtual network. And when you sub break it down, that network into sub parts, we call it as subnet. So within the virtual network we have subnets in place, and you will place your machines in different subnets. Why do we place it that way? See, this machine might be for front end servers. This machines subnet 2 is for the backend servers. So you wanted to segregate your machines according to your workload in your network, and that is one part of the network architecture way of doing things. So that point of time with subnet will be very helpful, and one subnet will have specific set of network filtration rules, and other subnet will have network filtration rules. But see, this virtual network will not be connected to any other network. It's only this virtual network it's connected within the Azure network, and it's this is not connected to internet and everything. Okay, this is something which you have to be aware of. To connect with internet, how do we do it? Is we'll get into it. So we see in what is virtual network, what is subnet, and we'll get into right now. Let's understand how the other things are there. We have NIC, we have security group, we have public IP, and where does they come in place in virtual network. Now, when you wanted to connect with internet, you have to use public IP. So the public IP is a service in Azure which you will create, and you will attach this public IP to your network interface card. So the if you go into network interface card, you will see you can associate an public IP for that, and similarly, you are creating your machine in a virtual network, right? So you are having a virtual network. In that virtual network is what machine will be there. Now your virtual network will be connected to network interface card using this, and will give you a private IP address. So what does a private address? In this, what does IP address means? It is a specific in network. It is a address for the machine, because the network, when we are saying that a message has to flow, a message is coming from a different network to this network. Okay, how will we uh, what do you say? How are we trying to how will that message will go to this specific machine? So it has to have an address. Each machine has to have their unique address, just like a message when it is going to your uh, what do you say, to your postcard is going from one place to another. You have to write, or a parcel is coming to you, you have to mention specifically your address. Do you think your address, whatever you are mentioning in your parcel, will be same to anyone in the world? No, it will, because of the pin code and the address and everything entirely changes, and it will be a unique one across the world. Similarly, you will have a unique IP address in a virtual network through which the message can be known that, oh, it has to be sent to a specific machine and all that. So in this virtual network, you will be given a private IP address to be detected, and similarly, when you are connected to internet, you will also have a public IP address, and through which you will be connected, and this entire IP addresses will be there in the network interface card. So public IP address is used for connecting with internet, and private IP address is something within the virtual network you have given a private IP address. And network interface card NIC is the one which will hold this both. You can have multiple NIC cards. So what does that mean? You can have multiple NIC cards to a machine if you wanted, or multiple IP configurations. So just like in the same network interface card, will be given multiple IP configurations. One IP with one IP configuration, you're seeing. So with one IP configuration, you're seeing one public IP address, one private IP address. Similarly, with another IP config, you can have a private IP address, and in that same IP config, you can have is another public address. So why do we choose multiple IP configs for a machine? Sometimes you might need to have two public IPs for your workload. It could be a virtual machine or it could be anything else. But my point is, you would be needing in an organization sometimes is two public IPs as a backup solution for your machines. And that point of time, you can create multiple IP configurations within a network interface card, and you can create multiple public IPs. Now let's get into each of it and understand how can we create one. Just give me a second, guys. Now, if we start looking at how do we create each of this, we'll go to Azure portal and I'll look for first a virtual network. And I already have a virtual network in place that is in East Asia. So when as I mentioned that you can create virtual network going to specifically to a virtual network here, this virtual network service searching in the search bar, and you can create a virtual network East US VNet or VNet East US, whatever it is, and selecting in which region you wanted this network in. Because if you are choosing in another region, okay, this virtual network will be when you're creating machines in suppose East US, you need a network in East US. You can't choose a network in Central India or Australia, or you can't choose UK and all that. You have to specifically choose the East US. When you wanted machines in East US means you need a East US VNet. So you have to, how do you create the East US VNet? Not with the naming convention, but with the region. We are choosing in which location we want our network to be. And then automatically we can link our machines and everything. So here, if you see, I'm giving the IP address space. If you remember, I was talking about we can choose we can be given an option of CIDR. You can choose any set of IP address and everything. By default, Azure, when you're creating a network, it's auto-populating and giving us an IP address and everything. But if you wanted, you can change it. You can specifically mention I, 172.19.0.0.16. So here you have to understand how does an IP address works. IP address space. So in networking basics, when we discussed what does zero mean and 8 mean, and when you go 10.16, what does that mean? So when you give 16/16, when you give /24, when you give /32, that we have to understand. This is a later part. I think we in the basics, if you refer the networking basics, you will understand this, how did we do it and everything. But if I go back here, I just gave you this one, and I have to create a subnet. By default, at least one subnet has to be created. You can't place machines without a subnet. Okay, you have to segregate it in the network with subnet. So I'm using front end servers, and in that I'll divide this. I have to divide the subnet into smaller subset. So I'm going to say /24, the smaller subnet, and if you give a wrong IP address space in that, it will not allow us to create And then in security, do you want it to enable bash and host? Do you want it to have a DDoS protection standard, everything? That is a later part of the discussion. When we get into specifically about networking concepts, we'll deep dive more on that. As of now, I'm directly going and creating a virtual network here. So I'm creating a virtual network in East US. So if I wanted to create a virtual network in East India, or sorry, East Asia, this network, I can't see this network anymore. And how will, by default, when you are creating a virtual machine, where is the virtual network is getting created by default? Azure is auto-populating based on which resource group and where is the location. So if you are choosing here East Asia, or if you are choosing servers Japan East, then your network, if you go in the networking section, it's auto creating based on your resource group. It is create took the resource group as a prefix and gave hyphen VNet, and it auto populated an IP address for that. So this one, if you see, it auto populated that this is the network, and you can actually change your IP address and everything. But this is not how we create. We create first a network, we create subnets, then we segregate what machines has to be set in which VNet and all that. So if you see VNet East US, so this is in the East US VNet, right? So if I go here and I check East US RG and I select East US, I go into networks. It's automatically, if in that region and if I have any network, it is automatically selecting that. Okay. But if you wanted to create your machine in a different virtual network other than this East US VNet which you just now created, then we can go and click on create new and you can create one. So you're placing your machine end of the day in that virtual network. So as per this, if you see, you're creating your machine in a specific subnet of a virtual network. Without that, a virtual machine won't be created at any cost. Now, where do we see a NIC and where do we see a private IP address and public IP address? Now let's look at already deployed virtual machine. If I go and click on create, just like in the previous videos, where could I find what I am looking for? Now I'll go into a virtual machine, and a virtual machine is created. You will have, if I go into the resource groups, or when a virtual machine is getting created, you will see network security group, which is NSG. We will talk about that. I just didn't speak about it yet. We have network interface card. We have a public IP address. We have a disk OS disk, and we have a virtual network. Now, your machine is connected to the virtual network using this NIC, and NIC has, as I mentioned, an IP configuration, and within the IP configuration, IP config, we have that was named as I named IP config 1. When I was explaining this IP config 1, you have private IP address, but here they named it as IP config my VM, and here you have a public IP. Through this public IP, the machine is connected to internet, and we have a private IP address given within the machine. So if I go and look in virtual machines, if I go into virtual network and I look at, this is a virtual network, and if I look at, the address space is 10.0.0.0/16. What does this mean? It means that the IP addresses you will be allocating it in that machine as 10.0.0.255.255. So the first machine which got created is this Apache 01, and it is being placed in the subnet called my VM subnet, and the subnet is this one. So they divided this entire network. Why? Because if this one can be broke down into, if you see, into in this process, right? So you can, like that, you can break down into 256 times. Now I took the first one. The slash 24 doesn't, it means that this one only. Okay. So when I placed my machine in this specific subnet, okay, in this specific subnet, as of now, this rest of the things I haven't defined. If I go into the virtual network, I haven't defined the other subnets yet, but I defined this subnet. Now in this subnet, I placed my machine. Now, so if you go and see the private IP address of this, it is 10.0.04. When you are creating any machines in subnet, 5 Azure will reserve 5 IP addresses in a subnet, in any subnet. If you have 10 subnets, 5 in each subnet, 5 IP addresses it will reserve for itself. So in that they'll reserve 10.0.0, uh, 10.0.0.1, they'll reserve. So it's not just 10, so it is they'll reserve 0, 1, 2, 10.0.0.3, and they'll reserve 10.0.0.255. So the last one and the first four, they will reserve. So when I say first four, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 255. The rest of the machines, whenever you're placing in that subnet, it will start from that 4, 5, 6, 7, and all that. That's why you're seeing right now here as 4. If I create in this machine in this what do you say, virtual network, if I create one more machine selecting this virtual network in East Asia, then the next virtual machine IP private IP address is 10.0.0.5. Okay, this is being given 4, and that the other machine will be given 5, and like that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 till 254. And if you wanted to create one more VM after 254, then you have to create it in another subnet, because this subnet has been full. It has in a subnet. In this subnet it has 256 IP addresses. In that already 5 has been taken by Azure. So 251 addresses are what will be available, and so you can create 251 machines. And if you are having like 400 machines, then you have to create another subnet. And as I said, we segregate machines based on subnet by subnet. Why? Uh, so that we can define workloads and we can define the security groups and everything. So this is how this works. And if I go back to this, where did we come from here? We came from the network interface card. So network interface has two. It has the public IP and it has the private IP. Okay, you can, so how I can ask a question like how this public IPs and private IP addresses are connected to virtual machine. It is connected through network interface card. Network interface card is a virtual network interface card. It's not real existing hardware. They, for all the machines, they have a huge virtual network interface network switch. In that, it is logically they're creating a network interface card which does an operation of communicating the messages entirely from the network, any network. So because network interface card has public IP or a private IP, so when connections can come from the messages can come from a public IP address or from internet or from the private IP address. So all that will be going through network interface card. And where this NSG network security group is the one which will filter the traffic. Security group is the one which will filter the traffic based on ports, protocols, and address, CIDR, address space. So which IP addresses should be allowed, which ports should be allowed, which protocol should be allowed, all will be taken care by network security group. So network security group is like a firewall, is like is the stopping, is the security guard. Oh, these connections are coming. to this VM, either from internet, either from internet or from the private IP address. It's going there. Now you can set up a security guard here, which is secure network interface NSG, network security group, and say all these connections are coming. So usually the connections will come from based on port, protocol, and CIDR. So let's see ports. So when I go and look at this and machines NSG, okay, I have an NSG in place, and that NSG will have inbound rules and outbound rules. What does that mean? So when we take an NSG, uh, set up an NSG here, so the connections can be from public IP, which can be coming, or machine is sending. Okay, incoming to the machine are all inbound rules, and send from the machine it is going out, then it is outbound rules, outbound connections. Otherwise, the other way is outbound connections. And when a machine it is coming to the machine, it is inbound connection. Similarly, from private IP address, it is the same thing. If it is going out of the machine, it is outbound connections or outbound rules and all that we'll set up. And we have, if you're going inside VM, to the VM from the network and everything, it is inbound connections. So when different connections are coming from inbound, outbound, and everything, I'm going to create a rules. So if you see a rule here, I can create a rule. So I'll go to the NSG here to the network inbound security rules. I can add a rule. So when you look at a rule, we have a port. So which ports are allowed? You can when I give star, it is all, and which port, okay, which port from, okay, this is source port and this is destination. So which port should I allow? You can mention here specific port. And source means, so if it is coming from private IP address, that's a source. If it is coming from internet, that's a source. So when the connections are coming, okay, uh, from which port you want, which port you wanted to allow, or any port, specific port, 22 port should not be allowed to be connected to internet. So when we are trying to connect to machines, right, we are, if this is a Linux machine, so we will be connecting to 22 port. And if I don't allow that one, if you see here, if I don't allow the 22 port from internet, from my desktop, I'm connected to the internet, right, to Azure, and I can't be able to log in from my desktop to this machine if 22 port is not been allowed, because even if even this machine has a public IP, if I send the request from my machine 22 SSH username at the rate I public IP address of the machine, it will not be in a position to go and connect to it, because the security guard, which is the NSG, will be stopping, saying that you are not allowed. So I have to specifically create a rule saying that 22 port should be allowed, and it as it is allowed right now, the security group will check its rules. Oh, this is an inbound rule. In the inbound rules, 22 port is allowed for any from any source. Okay, so if I click here and I select source, I can select anything. So here, if I wanted to give service, I wanted to allow only internet, I can specifically mention that, or I wanted to only allow virtual network, I can allow only the Azure virtual networks in this. So like that, I can do create rules. So creating different types of rules is another entirely. At this point of time, we only are focusing on what is a virtual network, what is a network security group, what is a public IP, and how does it matter to a VM. So in that point of view, we are talking about all these scenarios and everything. So let's see a rule in more depth. So we have port and we have protocol. So you see protocols TCP, UDP, ICMP. So understand, you can refer the basics of networking basics. What is a TCP? What is a UDP? What is ICMP? And then we have an action called allow deny, and then we have priority. more the lower the priority, higher the rank it is. Means let's assume that you have a priority as 1, this rank 1. So who will be the first, as per rules, who will be considered the first, the rule priority one, which is lesser number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the ones which will be first considered. So accordingly, till 65,500 is the you can have the priority numbers. And um, by default, the last one is saying that you can deny everything. Okay. So even when they're saying deny everything, the lower port is saying that allow 22 port. So other than 22 port, it will deny everything. Okay. So when this, they assume that these are like officers. So whoever is having the higher rank, those will be followed, and after that the lower ranks will be left out. Whatever their commands are will be will be followed at which will not be contradicting the other people who are on the top. So so it means that the lower priority numbers, whatever they say, those will be as per the action. If they are said to be denied, then they'll be denied. If they're said to be allowed, they'll be allowed. So rules will be as per the priority numbers, and lower the priority, higher the rank, and they will be the first to be considered. So by default, the rest of the ports, if you don't mention anything like allow the specific ports and everything, then by default the rest will be denied, whatever are not being mentioned in the previous priority numbers. So here they're saying that virtual network to virtual network is allowed. Load balancer to any port and any protocol is allowed. But the rest, if you don't mention which are allowed, then all that will be denied. That's how you write a security group. We'll get deep dive more on that. As of now, I'm just showing you just on how that works and everything. But let's me finally summarize it. When you create a virtual network, when you create a virtual machine, you need a virtual network in place, and this is the virtual network. And this is a logical network which is created within the Azure network. What does Azure network is helpful for? Azure network is the network which Azure is established within their machines and everything. In that, they have given uh, user one specific logical network, so that within a user can, whatever resources he creates in Azure, like databases, app services, Kubernetes services, Azure functions, data factory solutions, and all that, they can be connected within this network to the all the services. So to this establishing that connection between user services and everything, they are giving an option of virtual network. But virtual network is region specific. So if you are trying to create machines, any service in virtual network, then it should be ensuring that that is in the same region where the virtual network is. You can't create a machine, for example, in East US when the network is in West US or Central India. Wherever the network is, that is where you can create that one. And next one is when you're choosing any specific IP address for a machine and all that, it will be based on the subnet. So you have to even choose which subnet you wanted to place your machines and everything. So when I'm creating a machine, do I really have an option of choosing my uh, IP address? Yes. So if I go into all services and if I select virtual machine, if I click on create, in networking option, you will also see the subnet solution. Okay, so if I create here, so let me choose. So here, previously it didn't auto populate, but you can choose a subnet. So you're not able to create here, but you can go ahead to that virtual network and you can create subnets and everything. And so without having a subnet, that IP address won't be given to the machine, and without that happening, machine can't be created. So you have to choose virtual network, you have to choose which subnet, and then only the IP address will get created. And as I said, how will first 5 IP addresses in a subnet will be reserved for Azure. So 0, 1, 2, 3 will be reserved and 255 will be reserved. So when you're creating a subnet, so accordingly 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 will be given, till 254 will be given to whichever services where you're creating it. And that's a private IP address. To a machine specifically, the private IP address will be connected from network interface card. And NIC is the one which will also be having public IP address, and public IP address is the one which will be connected to internet. So these are all the different services when you see a virtual machine. And at this and when we go into NSG, one more thing I wanted to bring you is when we go into NSG, we can link a security guard. Let's assume that there is a security guard. We can link the security guard to a NIC level or to a subnet level. As of now, I didn't keep it to a subnet level. I set to a only to a NIC level. So there'll be a security guard here, NSG, and it will monitor all the traffic which is coming from the public IP or private IP address, which are inbound and outbound rules, outbound connections, and as per the rules which are mentioned in the security group, it will filter the traffic. And this is about it. So as we create instances at that point of time, I'll try to point out, but this is the whole concept.